Hey everybody, it's Book of Katherine. I hope you're doing well. So I wanted to talk to teachers today or anyone that works with kids. My earliest job, I suppose you could say, was working in the classroom with kids, kindergarten and then all the way up through 12th grade and working with development. And I realized that they don't really talk today about how to identify abuse in the classroom anymore. I understand that we really do training. They're doing more when they teach you. Teachers training has almost always trained you on things from either it's been linguistics, things for the actual curriculum in the classroom, whether it's been math or how to teach better, or how to teach literature better or writing styles better. Formulas to do that, or how to organize your classroom better, things like that. Or going into things culturally, how to, watch your classroom better and manipulate language and things like that. But something that hasn't really been taught, and even wasn't even taught I went to one of the top schools in education for my graduate school of education. And I feel really, really lucky for my training there. But even in that area, they didn't train us in abuse. They trained us in disabilities, but they didn't train us in actual signs of abuse. Like they did very little in actually training us to recognize systematic abuse in alcoholism, systematic abuse. We're mandated reporters. We're supposed to actually report it when it comes to, hey, a child's being abused in the home. But the only way we ever know that, if you notice, is that we see it if a child actually says it. Like if a child says, I was beaten last night, or if it basically gets reported to you by a student. And it's not that we're supposed to necessarily look out for it and look for signs of abuse and get reported it. But I guess that's the thing is with CPS, I mean, everyone in society is reporting each other. As I think as an instructor, it's really important to know signs of abuse as a teacher when you approach the classroom. I know I had a lot of training because I did, not because of my training as a teacher. It's because when I was coming up as a student, I entered all of these like counseling programs, like either peer support or peer count. I did all these supplemental counseling, like psychology counseling and developmental training programs, just because they said that I'd be good. Like they entered me in all these things. They put me in programs training that just happened to be working with that sort of thing, so that by the time I became a teacher, by the time I decided that's what I wanted to do, I just happened to have all of this extra training that wasn't actually included in being a trained teacher, which is scary because we're mandated reporters, but they don't actually train us. And maybe some states do, but California certainly didn't. And California has a lot of different training programs. And their training programs are almost entirely UNESCO based, and those are very, very different. Those are more on a socialist system of what the family values of, like more of the corporates of like BMW and BASF and the powerful families of Europe, way more along those values of like the EU. Those are all the systems that are being taught in the classroom. So when you go in there, when you go into a summer session now as a teacher, you're going to go in there and you're going to learn things that they were teaching in, pre-civil rights of pre-liberal movements of the 1600s that they were doing in the monarchies. Those are the sorts of things they're going to be teaching you for your classroom. And so that's a very, very different approach to teaching schooling. So I'd like to help you out a little bit today with how you can identify abuse in your classroom so that you can approach students differently. What happens with students is sometimes you as a teacher can actually think the kids who are abused are actually, it's very interesting. We can accidentally as teachers increase the abuse on students who are being abused in the home. And I'm watching shows actually do it. I'm watching shows go into classrooms and they think they're being helpful. and they actually increase the violence of the student in the home because they aren't aware of the signs of abuse. And it's starting to really startle me, because as TV programs and as UNESCO and the United Nations puts more and more culture, not just math and curriculum and education, as they're involving themselves much more in what thoughts we should have as humans, they're really entering into the home of students. And unfortunately, that means they're having students self-report on their families. Well, when a student self-reports on their family and a student doesn't know they're being abused, most students don't know they're being abused, especially the worst. Students who are being abused the worst have no idea. And the parents don't want them saying a thing. Those parents know they're abusing their kids. And then the school expects them to self-report it. And then the teacher goes and tries to correct it and tries to correct the household. But the kid and the parent will say it to the teacher, "Oh, thank you so much. This is so great." And then they go home and that kid doesn't eat for days. And the teacher doesn't even catch it. The kids who are the most abused are the kids, they'll look like Nazi starvation kids. They will be the most quiet. They'll be the most obedient. You'll never notice them in class. You will think they're the best students. The worst abused students, they say it all the time in court documents, the research is coming out, emotionally abused kids, emotional abuse lasts longer than physical abuse. If a kid is not emotionally abused, but they're physically abused, they get over that much faster than a kid who is emotionally abused and not physically abused, though that's very rare. There's usually both goes hands in hand. But a kid who's being emotionally abused, that's basically like brainwashing or whatever. That's what emotional abuse means. They're being brainwashed by their parents. They have no private internal thoughts of their own. They have no individuality. So the student comes into the classroom. So I can give you an example right now. I saw a ballet class. And why it's such a problem is because you as a teacher will usually overlook these students because they will be the ones that fly under the radar the most, because in their home, that's how they are programmed. They have to fly under the radar, so they are avoiding abuse. They are trying to avoid abuse, so they are the pleasers of everyone and just trying to avoid. But if you do something around them and you've got a real big problem on your hands. If they have a startle syndrome, you've got a real, if their eyes are drawn in, if there's something wrong with their coloring, if their eyes are downcast, they're kids, they should be very upright. They should be youthful. They should have a youthful glow, and they should just be shining, like they should be shining and electrical and everything like that. But they shouldn't, at the tone of correction, there shouldn't be a snap. If there is at the sign of correction, like they got something wrong, and there is you've got a big problem. A big problem in the home. If they're terrified of correction, terrified that they did something wrong in authority. And one of the ways you can see it, like I saw this ballet lineup, and there was a ballet class going on. It was someplace in the southern states or whatever. And this could happen in any ballet class, but it was amazing because it had a whole range of kids, and it was just one ballet bar, and there was a whole range of kids, whole range of heights in this beginning ballet class. And all these ballet kids were sitting there going down, up, plie, down, up, plie. And what they were doing is they were looking at the teacher, down, up, plie, down, up, plie. And you could watch those faces, and just by watching the faces, you could tell which ones were healthy and which ones, you could literally tell each of their mental abuse and which one of their mentals, you could see their home life written on each of their faces. Like one girl was just like, dun dun and dun 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 and dun dun dun. She was completely able to she was just self-possessed and able to do it, happy, fine, able to do it, and I'm fine, and I'm stable, and I'm able to smile and enjoy it, because that's all that was happening in the room. The teacher was just saying play, and she was able to be in a room of a ballet teacher with authority. There was an authority figure saying go down and up, and they were like, okay, I'm able to pay attention to authority, and down and up and down, and I'm able to listen. Then there were other kids that were like, I don't know, whatever, I guess, or whatever. And then you're like, okay, they're not able to really pay attention, or whether they're bored, and they're like, should I be paying attention to this person, or should I be paying attention to that person, or whatever? And then they'd stop every once in a while, and you're like, all right, they don't know how to have an attention span or whatever, and they're not necessarily whatever. And that's scary a little bit, because you're like, what's going on? No one's expecting them. No one's helping sit down with them and reading with them with the book, helping their brains. There's not, with the attention deficit disorder, so much of this at a young age. There's a reason it wasn't around and then suddenly it came out. You know what I mean? There's so much, there is obviously some of it, but it's overdiagnosed for a reason. There's so much of it where we're hypersensitive, like, things like Pokemon came out and people started having seizures. We're over stimulated, and the brain isn't given time, a child's brain isn't given time to follow out the synapses and actually be sitting there, and the rewards of being able to sit still and follow a train of thought for a while. And that's necessary to succeed in life, is to follow a train for a while and because there's so many rewards at the end of that. You make the most money when you can sit and stay on a train of thought for a while. And in kids, that's why we keep classes shorter for younger kids, and shorter, and you don't do this for as long. But if they can't handle just this for a little bit, and it's not and that doesn't seem like a huge burden, then there's something wrong. The parents aren't sitting with them and teaching them that can be enjoyable by reading a book, or keeping it calm enough in the house for them to do that, or singing a song with them in the car and getting them through a song and showing them that it's enjoyable and demonstrating that for them. And then, but at the very end of a line, there was just one kid that was just like, just blank face, almost gray. And the thing is that I didn't even notice the kid until I started talking to my husband about each of the kids. Like, look at that. Because I know so much about dancing, and I was like, oh, this is how they teach the classes now. And oh, look at how this kid's doing this and this and this, and look at how they do the distant bars different. And then I was like, and the kid was at the very end, because they don't want to be noticed, but they were the closest to the teacher because they don't want to get anything wrong. They don't want to miss a thing that teacher says. If they get further away the teacher, they feel like they could miss something. And if they miss something from the teacher, then they could get punished. So they are as close as they can get from the teacher. They were as close as they made sure they stayed close. And that kid was just like ashen gray, and just no personality whatsoever. Just ashen gray and just completely blank. And it was almost like watching socialism. You know what you see when you see North Korea, just duck walk. Just nothing. Okay, like when you watch what you see when we watch The Dark Crystal and they suck the essence out. And that's what abusive parents do, is abusive parents suck the essence out of a child, and that's what they feed on. That's how they live. They don't have their own life. They suck and they drink the essence of a child in order, that's their alcohol at night, is to suck the essence out of their child, and they just enjoy it. That's their essence, and the child just has no life, and you don't notice those children. That's the worst kind of abuse. That's the worst kind of abuse. And sometimes they're malnourished and malfed, but you don't notice it because they're the most well-behaved. They have the best grades, because if you don't have the best grades, you make your parents look bad. And these parents keep the absolute best and most utmost looking houses. They have the best. You will think that they are the best parents ever. They keep the best. These parents they make it look like they are the most shining example parents and everything like that. But you will notice, if you start to pay attention, you'll never notice that they pat their kids on the head. You'll notice that they don't actually touch their kids. They don't actually hug their kids. Their kids don't actually run up to them and hold them. Their kids are not, there isn't that bond. Their kid just kind of gets close to the parent in obedience and then follows them out. It's just literally almost like a military thing. You guys really need to start watching for that. And so I'm just really concerned that we aren't training. There's also things about the alcoholic system that we should start to watch for. And also depression. There's other types of depression that like the worst kind of depression. Remember, I talked about my depression series, the difference between just regular depression, like, depression where you get blue, versus major depression. I had a student who had major depression, and he's just a bright, the smartest kid, truly the smartest kid in all the classes. And you have a decision of like, okay, he couldn't do any of his work. He'd lost all powers of concentration. He actually couldn't concentrate to do any of his work because of things falling apart. And I recognized the signs of major depression. And I was like, these are going to define his entire college career. He is truly the most brilliant mind in the entire school. He could have kicked butt at Harvard, any Ivy League school, truly a genius. And he had major depression. He just couldn't, his brain just started disconnecting, and I knew the signs of it. And so I talked with him, and I was just like, look, I think, and he ended up pulling out of it by the end of the school year, but it's because I caught it. And I was like, look, here's what's happening with, like, I was like, I think, are you having like night sweats? Are you having, like, I just think it may possibly be, I'm concerned because he just stopped doing work. Like, he just stopped doing work. Now, the other teachers were just like, oh, he's falling off a cliff. He's not doing work. Like, that's irresponsible. And I was just like, that's not this kid, But the kid started going blank in class. Like, just started kind of like doing this blank thing. Just couldn't, and just kind of like getting fatigued in class. That's something else entirely. That's when depression goes further and beyond. And I didn't even go into, I can't remember, it may have been too long now or whatever, but I remember when I spoke to him, he cried. And I spoke to him privately or whatever, but then he got better because I gave him resources. Like, I gave him resources of what he could do. And I gave him a link of what was happening to his body, because at that point it becomes a chemical reaction. If you don't take care of the depression. And that's the thing, is that some households say no medication. Some churches, I'm learning online, some churches say no medication. Like, they're like, oh, no medication, that's from the devil. Just like the psychology industry, BASF will say, oh, once you get on medication, you should never get off of it. That's the extreme here. And then the churches, on the other hand, are saying never get on medication. There are these two extremes, whereas like the healthy, thing in the middle is that there are some medications are good sometime for a short bit to get you out. And then every person is such an individual. Not everybody needs medication. The research shows that most people just need cognitive therapy. If they do the cognitive therapy work, they can get there. Major depression, on the other hand, major depression is almost impossible to get out of it without just a boost with something like, there's different kinds of, there's a whole different kinds of the antidepressants. There's things that affect your energy, like Wellbutrin, that affects your energy, versus things like Lexapro that affect your anxiety and all these things, but they affect your weight. There's all these bad things that do, and they really can screw with you. And so you have to have good doctors. That's the thing, is that good doctors. I know for me, like I'm listening to some of these now that I'm starting to get into, like, I'm getting the digger. You got to go into crazy places for research. And I'm starting to learn some more about what some of these churches are teaching. And I'm like, oh my God, like some of the stuff that I take for my anti-shaking that changed my life and turned my life around and made me able to do this channel. Like, they would say, don't take it. That scares me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, well, I wouldn't have discovered any of this if that's taking my pain down and giving me the ability to walk again. and stuff. I'm like, we have had incredible, there's a reason we're living to 100, and a lot of that is medical breakthrough. But I get it, because we also have over here BASF, and the people producing these drugs are actually, now that Wall Street has made the hospitals a profit industry instead of a health industry, they're paying the doctors to overprescribe, and they just, I've seen the most horrific. 10 years I went without getting better. 10 years before I finally, and I'm actually starting to wonder if if Donald Trump didn't turn things around for me. I'm really starting to wonder that, looking back at the bills. I've been looking back at the bills, and Right to Try. You guys, if you look at it, I didn't get procedures until he was in office. Like, I'm a little freaked about that, to tell you the truth. Like, is that because he passed Right to Try? I really need to look at that and look at the dates, because I found out that I only just found this out in December, that my procedures are, my family knew it, but I try to stay out of some things as much as I can for my stress level. But I found out my procedures are, by insurance standards, experimental. Isn't that, because they're so advanced. Look what they're doing. Look what they're doing. They're getting me to walk again with such minimal weeks later after the procedure. I'm like, boom, or the next day I'm like, boom. That obviously is super advanced science. But so that tells you what these drugs are. They're super advanced science, some of these things. And so some of the antidepressants are the same way. Our life expectancy used to be so much shorter, even 100 years ago, before all this was developed. Our life expectancy was so much shorter. So I really would encourage you, teachers, to just start educating yourself a little bit more on the signs of things like major depression for your kids. You're already encouraged now to just talk to your kids or report things so much. But mostly do it so that you don't get your kids into more trouble than you think. Like, oh, these parents, because your kid, you always think the grade A student is going to be the student that has the best home life, and that is categorically such a falsity. You cannot even understand, like, that is such and that's my biggest thing, is like, if they are a straight A student, number one, you don't understand, like, sometimes that can be because they're in an alcoholic system, and therefore they are the savior of the family. The family is looking to them to be the adult and save them all. And so they have to get the good grades. Otherwise, they're not being the adult in the family. And therefore, I can't tell you how many successful people I know that came from an alcoholic system, and they are successful merely because their family made them be the adult at 8 years old, because they were all drunk. Does that make sense? Like, you're assuming that they're coming from a healthy household, and that it just, or a loving household. Success in a classroom or good performance in a classroom can also be a symptom of abuse, is my point. And so just be a little bit more alert, and look, and then kids who are acting out and being violent as well. I want you to be aware that boys have aggression, and we're learning more and more through animals. Watch the animal kingdom and everything like that. I was lucky. I was raised in a household where there was roughhousing. My father always did sessions where we actually did, I'm learning now, I was very lucky for this. My father actually did tickle fights. We would do tickle fights, and my mother hated them or whatever, but we do big wrestling things, and they were very rare, like, they were very, very rare, but he'd do big, and he'd be like, rah, and we would all wrestle and tickle or whatever. And when Steven Crowder talks about, like, that teaches you your limits or whatever, and he's right. Like, my father would be like, now that hurts or whatever, now that's too far. We would learn the limits of, like, what our strengths were, and, like, each one of us was a different strength. We were all different ages, and so he would tell us, like, this is too much for the little one, or this, and we'd have to learn to be gentle with the little one, or we could go stronger with the middle-aged one, or we could go this with it, and then we could go big with the big guy. And we learned to tailor our bodies back physically in space, and we really learned how to manipulate our bodies, and we learned what our bodies could do through wrestling and through tickling. And And I learned that with Jordan Peterson. He was like saying rats get tickled with the end of a eraser. And he was like, now who wants to know, like, who cares about rats, laughing, giggling? You can actually hear supersonic giggling when you tickle them at the end of an eraser. And he's like, why do you care about that? And he's like, because it turns out play is inherent in the animal kingdom, like play and laughing and giggling and wrestling. And I was like, yeah, like I'm really lucky I got that. Like not a lot, but I got enough of it. And I think that's part of the reason I was able to be a successful dancer is because I did end up using my body in some of that wrestling so that when a man takes me in a and stops me, I don't feel attacked. I don't feel like that's aggressive. I feel like that's like I feel like that's beautiful. I see the paso doble as I love that power, but I feel equal and matched and, does that make sense? Because I ended up doing wrestling and play and all this stuff. So I see the beauty and the magic in it because I was allowed to do that as a child and feel that out. But you're seeing with a lot of young boys, they're not allowed to do that anymore. They're being raised in single mother homes. Single mothers, a lot of single mothers are single mothers because they were, like me, raised by a mother who was taught that any kind of aggression in a man is bad. I was lucky because right before, like literally as I met my husband, I read a book on masculinity. Right as I met my husband, even though he's a ballroom dancer, I read a book on masculinity that completely, I was a teacher and everything. And I swear to goodness gracious, I wouldn't have married it. Like I would not if he would have scared me when I started dating him and everything. And it happened right away. Like right after I read the book, he sent me this questionnaire and the answers would have scared me off. I would have thought he was a jerk. I never would have been married to him because I would have been like, oh my gosh, he answered this way. Like that's aggressive. And that's the thing. And so they get terrified of any kind of aggression in a boy. And thank goodness I had read this book because I was like, oh, they're just the hunter-gatherers and I'm the nurturer protector. That's just how we're made inherently. And it goes back, millions of years. That's how we survived. And so this is what's left over him. We don't have to do that anymore. So we're not used to it. But, if a bear ever comes out, there's a reason. And he still does. Like if there's a spider and, he's around, like, I'm like, go. Hunt. I mean, I'm getting better at doing it myself, but I still squeal even if there's an ant, and, he just doesn't even flinch for a reason. It's just, he is aggressive. There just is no fear in a man. They're just like, ooh, like I said, my next door neighbor or whatever, he's like, I study spiders. And I'm like, you gotta be joking. Like, who does that? Men study spiders. Men keep tarantulas in cages. Have you ever heard of a girl keeping a tarantula in a cage? When we used to have pet stores and everything like that, did you ever notice it was the boys who kept tarantulas? The girls didn't keep tarantulas. Girls had a fish. Girls had like a little gerbil. Like girls were like, oh, take a bird. Or, oh, like a little puppy or a little kitty. And the boys were like, I'll take a snake. I'll take a tarantula. Well, boys aren't really allowed to do that anymore. The UNESCO really, because it's this royal families, and the royal families, if you look over there, it's all women. It's Queen Elizabeth, Queen Victoria, Kate Middleton. It's all Princess Sophia. Like, it is all women rule the world. Beyonce, boom, women rule the world. Women rule the world. Completely, Europe is female, straight across the line, royal families, Europe, women. And so this whole aggressive thing is just being pushed down and boys. And so women are just terrified of it. They don't know what it looks like anymore. So you just have to kind of look at this. And when boys start acting out in anger, you have to remember that they're at home. They're not allowed to wrestle anymore. They're not allowed to be angry anymore. They're not allowed to have any aggression. And what we used to do is we used to send them to Boy Scouts or used to send them to wildlife camp. We used to let them go out and run. Remember Huck Finn? Like Huck Finn, we used to let them go out, build fences, run, and throw rocks. And that's what they did. They go throw rocks, they go fish, they go tackle the wild and get out their aggression in the wild. They go wild out there. And now they're all locked indoors in little apartments and their moms are telling them like, if you go wild, that must be there's something evil in you. Or if they fight, Huck Finn was all about fights. Ha, pop, pop, pop. And that's just how they learn their strength or whatever. And, and so you have to kind of understand that that's where they're coming from and start recommending things like wilderness camps or boys clubs or getting into wrestling or getting into boxing or healthy sports where they can get that aggression out, where it's okay to be, signing up for ROTC or signing up for the reserves or signing up for signing up for archery or armory or fencing or any kind of place where aggression is actually okay, where they can go smack something and it's a good thing, where they can go pop something, anything. Just like we women love kickboxing, we love it for a reason. We love going, yeah, because it feels good. Well, what thing can a boy do where they can go, yeah, and it feels good? Right now, all they can do is hit a little remote control. That's a little frustrating for boys. They need to do a little bit more, especially if they're in a household with, any kind of abuse going on. That increases their aggression. They need to go out there and do it. And unfortunately, it's only the streets that are offering that. No one's saying you can do a boys club. No one's saying you can go do boxing. No one's saying you can go do soccer. No one's saying that you can go, join scouts. No one's saying you can join the army. No one's saying go to the gun range and learn, or go to archery range and learn, or go try and sign up for the Olympics and learn how to do skeet shooting, win the skeet shooting Olympics or anything like that. No one's saying go out to the wild and go get into the water and get into the freezing rain and learn how to go learn how to dig an ice hole in the middle of the winter. Guys are great at that. Teach them how to get on a snowmobile and go out in the middle. It's only men that get on the snowmobiles around here. Like, there's snow. Every once in a while, the snow comes out, and then boom, I see snowmobiles. I don't see women on the snowmobiles. I don't see women on it. They're just like, whee! And then teach them about, skiing. Like, we used to do a ton of water skiing. Everywhere. Listen to the old tapes. Water skiing was everywhere. That gets your aggression out. Anything that pulls on the body. Think about it, ladies. You get your aggression out in a million different ways because you have dance. We have dance. Well, what is there for boys to do? Don't tell me baseball or soccer. Most of that is just standing. That's not the same as dance. Dance, we get to pound that ground. I loved flamenco. I was like, pound, pound, African dance. Boom, 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 bum. There's so much aggression in that. What is there like that for boys? They don't have the same thing. They used to be able to go out in the wild and throw things, and they have more than we do. And so think about that as well, teachers, that, our boys allowed with them, they're born with more testosterone. They're born to protect women and children from the wild. When a bear comes along, that's their DNA, their genetics. So where are they allowed, where is that, are they being allowed to exercise that at home, or are they being, shamed for it? So, give them some ways and some solutions around it and things like that. Because giving them drugs for their head, like I said, maybe a small portion, but in kids, it's not a smart thing at all. That's something that the very first people that ever suggested drugs for kids was the Nazis. Not a good idea. And by the way, I should just say, the major creators of drugs, the major producers of medications in the world of psychotherapy, major producers of that is BASF, the BASF, German BASF, that actually backed Hitler's campaign in National Socialism. And they are the major producers of vaccines and drugs today. They literally are the world's largest chemical company today. And they produce almost every single pharmaceutical drug. There are places that invent drugs, but then BASF is the one that produces it. And so you have to keep that in mind, that Bayer, based off of Bayern in Germany, Bayer and BASF were linked together in the Nazi Holocaust. They were the first one. They did all those experiments on psychodrugs. They created the birth control pill because they wanted to sterilize entire generations. And they, right after birth control pill, and they sterilized generations. If you've been on the birth control pill, how well are you doing having babies after the birth control pill? How well are women doing having a baby after the birth control? Maternal deaths are way up. Isn't that interesting? After abortion, maternal death rate is 50%. We haven't even looked yet at what losing a fetus is at. Losing a fetus is at after having an abortion. So these are all things we have to consider of the first pharmaceuticals ever tested on kids, that was happening by BASF and Bayer at 1865. So when we're doing that in schools and institutions, when humanity didn't do it for millions of years, and we came quite far, we got the Bill of Rights without ever doing that to our kids. And we did Huck Finn and everything. I really think we should think against it as teachers and educators, just be the child doesn't have a choice. And we always talk about a person's right to choose, and then we don't give them a right to choose as a child. I don't think that's quite fair when it comes to a chemical that goes into their body and will change them during development. Whatever you put in a kid's body chemically will change them during development. When I talk about things like things for my shaking and things like that, or like depressant drugs, I'm talking about those things in adulthood. Done developing adulthood, you have a choice. Or 18 afterwards, and close to develop, you have a choice. Then it's that person's choice. You're making your own decisions in your own bodies. As a child, I don't think, even as a parent, I'm like, I don't think so. I just don't think so. There's just too much evidence that cognitive therapies and behavioral therapies and the damage that it does. But that's my own personal opinion. Well, studies just back that up. But consider that, the history is just never talked about. So those are some things for teachers. I know I'm always talking about the political top of things, teachers, but most teachers don't go into the field because of the politics at the top of that. Most teachers are ignoring all that. Most teachers are just caught up into it. So I wanted to actually make a video for teachers and students who are actually in the school system. And I know that online I've recommended, and I still do honestly recommend it. I do not, because of UNESCO, because our entire school curriculum is not written by anything in America. Like, we may have a school of education, but our entire United Department of School of Education, our Congress will not change it. Remember, everything that you see changing at the federal level has been through executive orders by Trump. GOP Senate they're not letting through a single thing that changes what Obama did in those 10 years. They are preserving every Democrat thing in our actual law. They're not passing anything that will change what he did. And what he did was pass everything that the UN had, that entire Sustainable Development 17-point UNESCO thing. So our actual Department of Education is still completely UNESCO oriented, completely, United Nations run, completely European run, and socialist. And so our schools are still socialist. They're still formatted according to Nazism and what the Nazis taught, and it's a socialist system. It absolutely is why anti-Semitism is growing. It's why anti-Christian, remember the Nazi propaganda at the end said the Bible is the enemy. That's because the Bible taught rights. So I just really, it's why white supremacism is growing, and why just our school system is it's why teachers are being fired for using free speech. And the 50 states, the GOP people elected, they're not removing it either. They're going ahead and sustaining the UNESCO school systems at the United Nations, because they get, they're corrupt, unfortunately. It's so easy. They don't have to write anything. They just take it in, and they're just, because UNESCO just hands them all the curriculums, and they'll say, we'll pay you this much money if you just enter this curriculum. And that's what they do. And if you want to see where it's going, what the future of your state is, just look at California, Tent City, California. So that's everything they do there. California is about 3 years ahead of all the other states. And so 2 to 3 years ahead. So so my recommendation, if you're a parent, of course, is not to have your child educated at the schools, which is why they're starting to make, so many states are starting to make it illegal if you don't have your kid educated. That's entirely terrifying in its own, that you're making, schools an actual, I'm like, what have we become? You know what I mean? So that terrifies me. I think that, Abraham Lincoln, one of our greatest presidents ever, completed 2nd grade. That's it. Make your kids great readers. Have them read. Make them incredible readers, and then make them experience life. Have them experience as much of the world as possible, and teach them the benefits of work. Every piece of psychology backs up that every man, their deepest needs are to eat, sleep, and work. If you can teach them to be great, enjoy eating, enjoy reading, or enjoy eating, sleeping, and working. If they have those 3 things in life, they will go to 100 and be satisfied. Like, that's your great 3 needs of man, is to eat, sleep, and work. You start to lose sleep, you start to lose your mind. If you don't work, you start to lose your mind, as we saw by Mr. Cyborg, right? You start to dissociate, right? And if you don't eat, you start to die. Like all these things, you need these 3 things. And public education doesn't provide for any of those, right? It's just propaganda. So anyway, so those are the things if you teach your kid to be a great reader, and to socialize with people, be able to talk with people, and to go toe to toe with them. There's so much you can, if they can go out into the world and survive in the world, know how to talk to people, if they're able to travel, if they're able to go into a hotel, check themselves into a hotel, check themselves out of a hotel. Are they able to do that on their own? Are they able to go grocery shopping on their own? Can they do that on their own? Are they able to order a dinner on their own? Are they able to earn their own living for a month? All of those things schools don't teach us today. That's something your child needs to learn. And so those are the things that are important to learn today and you need to focus on. So I still believe all those things. All right. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you soon. And I hope that helps teachers. So if you enjoyed that, or if you got anything out of it, or if you appreciate my work today, go ahead and donate down below. I really, really appreciate it. I rely completely on you. I am not sponsored. I don't think I know of any organization donating to the things that I'm saying. Just the people of the world, the 99%. And that's who I want to reach anyway. So if you can donate, $1 a month is all it needs to be, just $1 a month. If you'd like to it's January, so just do it for the year. Just do $12 and we're all set. And thank you so much. I love you guys so much, and I'll talk to you later. And hit subscribe down below so you can always get it, because I'm not, it's just me. I don't have a team of people. I don't have a videographer. So I'm not good at, I don't send out things and notifications, everything. So subscribe so that you can actually get the videos and be notified as much as possible. All right. And, Twitter, @Book of Katherine. I'm on Twitter all the time. So I love you. All right. Bye.